Hello, 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 and welcome to the Neo Industrialist podcast. I am here today with my guest, Martha Montoya. Martha, before we explore how market intelligence might reshape agricultural futures, I want to create space for something deeper. The stories we tell about our beginnings often reveal the assumptions we carry forward. In indigenous traditions, origin stories weren't just personal narratives, which I'm sure you can relate to and appreciate. They were maps that showed how individual purpose connected to larger systems of meaning. I want you to know that you have absolute autonomy here. You can shape this conversation in whatever direction serves you best. Decline any question or take us somewhere completely unexpected. What is your origin story? How did you become someone who sees patterns others miss in food systems? Not just your resume, but the deeper current that brought you to this work.
Thank you so much, Melinda, for the question, the interview. But the question is, you're right. We are who we are because of where we come from. I come from an amazing entrepreneur parents that did what they call what we call now social enterprise. Founded schools for evening students and adult students in our country of origin, Colombia, and had universities and schools. So I learned to understand patterns through understanding society because it was very specific. Who would we be bringing into the school? People who had very low income, people who immigrated from rural areas into urban areas, people who have less than X amount of income. And so it was very much following the pattern of how do we help society while we make a living without overwhelmingly take over in the sense that we turn continuously back to the society. So that's a pattern. That's two parents of that nature. One, a very professor, chemist, biologist, and myself from that pattern. And then a very creative mother, entrepreneur, but creative in designing and graphics and things of that nature. That's where I really come. And the third one, growing up in coffee farms with my grandpa, moving around and seeing patterns of crops, patterns of markets since I was little age, listening to how is the coffee doing worldwide, why it's not doing worldwide. So those three combinations came to be who I am today.
Oh, and so how did your parents work with rural families shape your understanding of, I guess you talk about patterns, but again, I'm very data driven. So
Mhm.
when you talk about, let's talk about the agricultural economics. Obviously, you were a younger child. What was conversations like at the kitchen table when it came to the numbers?
Well, actually, the conversation were more than kitchen tables were driving from and to and listening to the case studies of a lot of students. Believe it or not, it's a pattern because at the end of the day, people don't understand that agriculture is about the most important person in that farm, which is the farmer, the human being. It's not the tractor, it's not the seed, it's the pattern of that brain. So I tell my kids that I really had a 18 to 20-year crash course on psychology, psychiatry, social enterprise, philosophy, sociology, listening to the patterns of parents raising kids, urban areas, no money, a lot of personal challenges across. So who succeeded and who did not, who sacrificed what for where. And so brain work has been more my research study, and even at this point in how human being thinks makes the difference for whether I sell something to somebody or I develop something for somebody. It's the brain of and the soul of that human being, which is the farmer in this case, or the buyer, or the
Right,
analyst.
right. That's so interesting. And really speaks to how one can actually almost layer in a human design element into their businesses because they're looking at this more from a holistic aspect and then deploying the technology. But before we get into that, you actually were a cartoonist.
Right. So in that life of growing up with entrepreneurs, listening to those human cases on and on, raised in a very Catholic environment, not the family, but the whole country, the school. I must say, my parents didn't go to church every Sunday. No, not that. So it was not that Catholicism. It was the environment of Catholicism. Reading the Pope's different books that they do, which is they write every year. I started doing the cartoons to convey the pain that I saw listening to the stories.
Mm.
And it was a way for me to express as a very quiet person that I used to be. People don't believe that today, but I was very quiet. Listening to the stories and how do I express my frustration, my sadness, my hope in a form, and cartooning became a comic strip, which is now a less used industry in the newspaper, my comic strips. I dreamt being a comic strip cartoonist since I was a little girl, reading the comic strips on every single newspaper in Colombia.
And then what happened with that passion?
So I decided that I wanted to come to the United States to be a cartoonist. Literally, that's what I came here for. And I landed in the wrong place. Cartooning and publishing is really a New York industry, not a Los Angeles industry, but we don't know that. And I landed at Mickey Mouse land, Bugs Bunny land, and that's called animation. And so I was like, whoa, okay, I guess I landed in the wrong place.
Yes.
When you're an immigrant, you don't just turn around and buy a ticket and go to the next
No.
town. And so, but then, as a librarian that I became, I read that Mr. Charles Schulz lived in Santa Rosa, California. And
Who
he
is
was
that?
always,
Can you expand for
sure.
people?
Charles
Yeah.
Schulz is the creator of Snoopy, the character Snoopy, and Charlie Brown. And he was always my hero when I was growing up. I had one book, only one book, but I think I read every single comic strip 20,000 times. He
Which
and
which book
another,
was that, if you don't
it's a
mind my
book,
asking?
it's one of the little comic books that they create, like a collection of the comic strips.
Right, right,
And
right.
I got one from an exchange student that came from the United States into Colombia and gave me that little booklet, and that was the only booklet I have. And I read I don't know, 20 pages of that 20,000 times. I still have my little booklet. And so when I found out that he lived in California, again, I'm naive. I come from a different country. I'm like, oh, he lives in California. I'll go and visit him. Well, Santa Rosa, California is like literally 7 to 8 hours by car.
Oh my God.
And so, but I decided I was going to go, and I did. And I started a journey of apprentice, for lack of word, asking literally to please teach me how to be a cartoonist. And 12 meetings later, that's what I was doing, my comic strip. And didn't know at that point, which everything is a journey, and even for what I do today, that was the beginning of licensing and intellectual property industry. It was the beginning of how do you control your intellectual property and how do you license your intellectual property. And landed, he invited through friends to go to the first trade show of licensing, which now is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I landed in the first trade show thinking, oh, this is the shows of licensing and IP. And that was my career, parallel to my whole business career of understanding IP and intellectual property. That's why everything I do in every business that I have worked or built or been around, IP is being intellectual property important, crucial to a business.
Exactly, exactly.
So I owe that comic strip and that cartooning in path that part of the business. But long story short, I licensed my cartoons. I published my cartoons. We were syndicated by United Media, by Tribune Media on the print side, and licensed by United Media. And I still get royalty checks on that.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Interesting. Okay, so Charles Schultz,
Mm-hmm.
was he an investor? Was he an advisor? Like, what role, once you were able to get access to that door, what role did he play in helping shape your company at the time?
I followed the old traditional in Italy where kids were sent to masters of art or different type of arts in Milan, and where you send the kid and the kid, well, there was no universities per se, so that teacher master will teach the art.
Yeah.
So that was my thinking, because for me there was no cartooning school, maybe animation, I don't know at that point, but there was only a cartooning by mail course, and that was it. So I landed there to ask him to be my mentor or master of understanding that. And so I literally went from 300 characters that I created, because when I created the cartoons, literally I created them around the periodic table, the chemistry table, the elements of the table,
Yeah.
to teach chemistry to adults through cartoons. And that could be another story, but how do I make life easier for somebody who drove a truck all day long and now they have to learn chemistry at 6, 7, 10 p.m. in the evening? So cartooning, my cartoons became this little character. So I had 300 cartoons, comic characters, and he narrowed me down to 5, saying focus, because your creativity and your whole energy will come into those 5 characters versus 200 of them. And so I am a very focused person because of on creativity and business, because of that teaching, that not only for that company, but in general, focus on 2, 3, 4 things, or characters in this case, and all of a sudden it was true. All of a sudden I started developing more those characters instead of having each character different things, and the stories, the narration, the dialogues became easier every single time that I would do my daily comic strip. It taught me also discipline. People get a little bit buried on coming up with ideas or developing proposals, coming up with switching brains from left to right fast. And that, doing a comic strip per day, it's a full-time job, literally. He did that. That's all he did, a comic strip per day. And then at the same time, switching your brain to business, numbers. So 2 different brains. So I've been told a couple times that how can you switch from creativity to numbers and business so fast? That was the training that I got at that point. So I got several things, but those are the biggest ones that I remember.
It's interesting, the ability to have focus, discipline, and the uniqueness of leveraging both your right and left brains, which, similar to you, I've had a sort of background around that, you know.
Yes.
So let's talk about which, coming from Bogota, Colombia, you moved to California to become a cartoonist. So how did you transition back into agriculture?
So since I came, again, this is what your background brings you. Comic strips, cartoons were going to be a hobby, not a career. So I knew that I had to have a real job. But I remember walking into Mr. Charles Schulz's office and say, so him and 2 people produce $1 billion sales a year. How is that? I mean, that was puzzling for me, because Latin America and over outside of the United States, or in the old traditional way, you have hundreds of millions, hundreds of employees in order to produce revenues. So the more employees have, quote unquote, the more revenues you have. So today that's an easy thought for many people, whether they're in TikTok and do a couple things and make more money than somebody who works many hours. But at that point, that was an unusual concept for me. So I knew that I had to get a job, at stake with a job. So my first one was literally making sure that I had that librarian job. But then the second one was applying for a job in the food industry and ag industry, because of my bilingual, bicultural culture. Redundant, but that's what it was. That a company from New Zealand required or needed a person to source in the Americas. And I was not going to be that. I was going to be the assistant to the assistant to the assistant. doing the job, but because again, my language and my cultural background. So that's how I started into sourcing for somebody. Eventually, I became the director of the Americas, sourcing anything at that point process. And then also they had a trading company on the side, which was the famous Japanese trading companies and logistics and what we call now supply chains. So I was trained under that whole time, I would say 10, 15 years of my life into sourcing, food, technology, logistics, and more important, trading, which is what we do day in, day out, and even bartering, which is very unusual. You buy one and sell another thing worldwide. And so that was my thinking. I will still do my cartooning, which I did. I never left it. I mean, I kept going to the trade. I will arrange my life around those industries, even the cartooning society, part of the cartooning society meetings and lunches and dinners, because I had too much passion for it. And interestingly enough, as I got into the food industry and I had a little bit more of authority, I started using my own cartooning thinking into everything I did. I had now the authority because I said, oh, wow, people here use cartoons for many things. And it's part of it. So I used to like design the boxes with different type of cartoons and different type of graphics. And I never forget one of our biggest customers of bananas in St. Petersburg, Russia, of all places, said that they only wanted the box, the product of bananas that came in that box with the cartoons. And I understood
Wow.
the power of, and that was a boat per month, per week, a vessel per week of bananas. But it was just bananas. And once we put the cartoons, it was, we want only the cartoon ones. And it was not the product, it was the what now is a Starbucks. You don't walk in for coffee, you work for an environment.
Yes, exactly. Wow. Okay, so now you went from seeing your parents on the farm, becoming a cartoonist, now gaining the technical know-how, the technical ability to really understand the entire supply chain network around agriculture. So now you're becoming the expert, the go-to person. So how did you now transition from that to actually founding your own company? To saying, you know what, this was great. Thank you very much. This is what I'm going to do because I'm seeing a problem. So maybe before starting talking about, let's talk about the problem that you saw that inspired you to start your company. What was that bottleneck that occurred?
Well, the first solution I had for the industry business, especially United States companies, was that actually I became an independent consultant earlier, even though I was with the initially with this company, the trading company from New Zealand and Australia. Eventually, it was, I would say, 2, 3, 4 years only, because I was asked to go and do more for more corporations under more my consulting status, because I was a USA resident, not a USA citizen.
Mm.
So I could travel the world more freely than being a US citizen. And very few people understand this, but when you're walking with a passport that is not a US passport, it's much easier to blend in, especially in rural areas, to try to do business. And again, interesting concept, but it was and still a good concept.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I had my green card, it before I became a US citizen, yeah, I felt that sense of freedom, even though it was in my mind restrictive because I wasn't a citizen yet. But there was something freeing about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden I start getting calls from large conglomerates through third parties to go and source worldwide products. So technically speaking, I've been on my own for the last 20 some years, without a very much more a structured company, but more like a agent.
Yeah.
Go get the thing done. Why eventually this is because I felt throughout all this process of sourcing around the world, whether it was Vietnam, South Africa, Chile, or even United States, every single time that we had a challenge in the supply chain, everybody got paid except the farmer. The farmer always takes the blunt of the industry because the trucking company gets paid, the brokers get paid, the packaging company gets paid, and when you do the final result, there's no money left for the farmer. You'll be surprised there's even a bill for the farmers. So not only they didn't make money, they are now on the hole and they have to recuperate. And that's part of what motivated me, because I saw continuously, remember, I come from a social enterprise family where I see, wow, how is it that the person or the human being that is doing all the effort to have that food on the table, after that whole effort, makes no money or loses money? And I was doing good job for large conglomerates and a couple hundred farmers here, a couple hundred farmers there. But one day I said, how do I scale something up to make sure that we keep farmers in the farm and we keep families and communities healthy around the world and in United States, which we have lost a lot of farming because of markets. And so that's how I got motivated on that.
Can you walk the audience through, because I understand what you're talking about, the supply chains, trucks, distribution, but let's pick something like a banana. Can you walk the audience through what the supply chain of a banana means to them? When they see it in the grocery store, what does that mean to them?
I would prefer to do a blueberry.
Oh, even better. Okay, go
And
ahead.
there's a reason for that. The whole Americas, from Portland all the way to Chile, produces blueberries. Well, bananas are only in tropical areas, right?
Okay, that's perfect. Okay.
So at any time, every single region is, people think, well, there's only one place, like bananas, only a couple places that produces banana. But blueberries, tomatoes, lettuce all move different times of the year based on the time of the year of the earth as it moves from winter to summer, from summer to winter. So the crops move, meaning we're harvesting in different parts of the world. Winter is Chile and down Argentina, Peru. Summer is United States, and so on and so forth, right? So the fact that all those supplier regions come online will determine where the buyer buys and when the buyer buys.
So when you say the buyer, what do you mean? Like, for example, the
Well,
agro-process.
the buyers could be fresh, a supermarket buyer,
Okay.
food service company for the restaurants, but also the process companies that want to freeze them or package them in juices. So you have that continuous ongoing of fresh process across the world on the ground fighting for that market. Because fresh pays more, but it's more risky. Process pays less, but it's more secure, right? But sometimes you have to do this continuously to make sure you pay your bills on a farm. Anyway, so that whole process requires somebody, human being, to understand how the markets are behaving, because if you come into the market when it's too late because the new region has started, then you lose money. And they call it the shoulders of the industry, the ins and outs of each region. And that's a southern, northern hemisphere of the world forever will be that. That's why I have said, and people finally have found out, the south of the hemisphere will be really the producer for this northern of the hemisphere in the future, stronger, every year stronger and stronger. And it has data showing that. So anything from Africa to Americas to the Indias of the world will be producing for themselves and for the world. So those movements of that blueberry, you start eating blueberries in Chile somewhere in November, December, and as you keep going, you check your labels in the supermarket and you see it goes from Chile to Argentina to Peru to Ecuador to Colombia to Mexico, and eventually hits into the United States Fresno, California, Portland, Rhode Island, so in Michigan, and then goes back up down.
And this is just a harvesting cycle.
The harvesting cycle.
Okay. So then what happens from the harvesting cycle to get the blueberries into the store?
So that's the easiest part, quote unquote.
Yes.
The hardest part is we just did a report, for example, that things could be going sideways when even 2, 3, 4 months before you harvest, because all of a sudden there's a heat wave. I'm just making it up in Fresno, California, and Peru or Mexico, where it's programmed to ship until a certain time, but the heat has pushed the flower out and the fruit out, and they're going to come earlier into the season. And now all of a sudden the farmers that are behind, coming from the back, will find that they will not be able to sell more product because the fresh product is coming out, because we, the consumers, want fresh everything, obviously. And so blueberries that are 3, 4 months into crop versus the ones that just came out, they're fresher, they're juicier, they're crispier, they're crunchier, will make the difference for the market. So that knowledge between the buyer who buys and the farmer who farms of the markets are crucial, more than knowing how much water is on the ground. Well, they will have to know that regardless, that's a standard. How much they farm, how much fertilizer, how much labor. That is understanding how to manage. Do I start planting earlier? Do I start planting late? So that forecasting thinking of the markets is what we do. It's futures. Look at the future based on the past, but what it looks as the future, so you can start doing different actions.
And that's not even the actual physical transportation from
This
farm
only
to
has to do
store.
with the markets.
And that has to do with the markets, with the future forecasting.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that the whole world have thought, well, it's weather at origin. I'll give you one example.
Yeah.
There's a storm. There's a storm in Chicago, and I cannot. There's no trucks coming into Chicago. So, do I put the blueberries, sit them there to wait until the storm is gone? No, this is perishable. So, if you know ahead of time that there's a storm going to happen in Chicago next week, you're not going to cut the berries, or you're going to go to processed food. So you're going to do something different. So weather patterns are not only origin or destination, other variable, exchange rates. There's the dollar goes up, the dollar goes down, makes a difference where you ship your product. Gasoline prices, weather patterns based on the commodity for the different regions. So there's 76 variables that this brain has to continuously think to trade, which is impossible. It is literally, I have friends, and I have been in this industry, that we start at 3 in the morning, and by 8 a.m. we're exhausted, literally brain exhausted, because you're go, 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 think. Is this happening? Is not happening? Make couple calls. How's the weather? How's this? Is there port strike? Oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh, there's violence in that country. We cannot ship the trucks. This week happened with some of the blackberries industry, and so all that has to be done with a brain. And two things are happening. Those us who grew up in this industry have been growing our muscle brain, making it stronger. But the new generations didn't have the time. Remember when I mentioned going to Mr. Charles Schulz? He was a senior guy who gave the time to train me. There's no more time for me to train anybody. So the idea of Agtools is to have this, even when they click and see the date of today, they will see automatically which regions are producing berries or blueberries, to be able to decide, oh, okay, and this is the volume. I used to have to call two of my mentors to ask for things of that nature. So the idea is to level the playing field, to have the new generations that data or thinking data to manage better our resources, because at the end of the day, it's our natural resources.
And that is what Agtools does, right?
100%.
That's the platform that you decided to build.
Yes, and people confuse us continuously, as I mentioned, Belinda, with AgTech, and we're really a financial tool. It's
Okay.
data of the markets to manage better your crops and manage better your contracts, whether you're negotiating to sell or you're negotiating to buy.
So what would, maybe this is a random question, what would agricultural futures, the markets, look like if they priced in regenerative practices as assets rather than inefficiencies? Is that part of this, 70 plus variables that you look
Well,
at?
and I have to clarify, Belinda, this is important. I should have started with that. Our platform is built for specialty crops, which is the fruits, vegetables, nuts, herbs, and plants. It's not for wheat, it's not for rice, it's not for corn. Very important.
Yes, very important. And why
Crucial.
is that important, Martha?
Two reasons. One, I've always believed, and now people are starting to see it, that the future of our health is in what we eat.
Mm.
And that's the specialty crops. I just mentioned fruits, vegetables, nuts, herbs, and plants. Yes, we can eat wheat. I love wheat. I eat corn, but that should not be the base of our food staple, right? So that was number one. Number two, nobody had built anything for this specialty crop industry because it's too complex. It moves too fast. It's too complex. Versus corn that you harvest and you put in silos and you sell whenever and you manage. You have days, even sometimes months, to manage the market. Not here. The minute that you plant anything, whether it's a rose or a nut, the time is ticking. You have only so many days after you harvest to have sold that. And I always give that story of if you harvest a strawberry in the morning today at 6 a.m., if I don't sell it by 8 or 9, I have to throw it away, literally, because the markets do not buy strawberries from the day before harvest. Okay, so that second part, which is okay, it is definitely a more volatile industry. And because I understood the industry so well and nobody had come into this industry, it made me think that because there was not an industry person with some technology background, which is a little bit of what I am and who I am, and this supply chain understanding, there was no software because it was A, too complex, and B, not enough money to make it happen.
Right.
And so that's why I went into this whole software development, because it also made it so elastic, so able to manage all the variables. Give you an example. I had a meeting with a customer last week, and they wanted specifically the amount of this, of that, in that product, of that. It's too complex, and so we can do it because we have the databases and the systems to do it, and now we could do it. So those are kind of the reasons: the specialty crop, the ability to do a software that was very flexible, and then COVID hit, and the world has changed, and now everybody wants real-time data. And so the software is built for any commodity, but we start with specialty crops.
Well, specialty crops, I mean, so, corn, soy, wheat are publicly traded, right, for the most part. And specialty crops, I would assume, are more privately traded.
Nobody has traded it because nobody has figured it out. And part of our journey has been bringing a couple human beings that are leaders in the industry of commodities to see what we're doing and start formulating. Because I'll tell you one thing, Belinda, even raw crops systems are broken. And I knew it since 20, 30 years ago when I used to trade grains from Brazil to the world. And the reality is that the United States is heavily subsidized, so it has a cushion for the markets. As a cushion. If something goes wrong, somebody's going to take care of the farmers in that industry. Not on the specialty crops. There's no subsidies on the specialty. Maybe on the almonds and the nuts, but not on the lettuce farmer. So that legislation difference has also made the fact that software companies can work for the raw crops versus the specialty crops.
Right.
And developed.
So when I think about today's global macroeconomic environment and amidst, the tariffs constantly changing and how that can impact specialty crops, especially with currency fluctuations, right? And pricing going up, coming down, climate, which you talked about. In the case of China. Do you have any expertise there? And can you maybe speak to how, for example, maybe is rice a specialty crop?
Well, let me give you one fun fact.
Save
The
me.
the strawberries that we have in our cereals, they're all coming from China.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Strawberries. So people think corn and wheat and rice. Strawberries. Think every single cereal that you open and has strawberries or berries, they come from China. So what people have not understood is that there's the food supply chain is all very interconnected worldwide. And that's why when they say consumers will pay for it, in our food industry definitely will pay for it. Because that tariff on that Chinese strawberry is going to impact our cereal. Right? So that interconnection, when I started this journey 30 years ago, we had, I don't know, 20, 30 countries trading a banana, pineapple. Now we have 200 and some countries trading from Kenya mangoes to the United Arabs, from Philippines pineapples into China and into Japan. You see what I mean? The world has changed in the sense that we, the consumers, want food day in, day out, health, and now even more healthier. So I think that the decision is going to be made, and I see that will happen. Start doing more local planting and sourcing, but I'm not sure we have the kind of like organic came online, and everybody thought we are going to go organic overnight. It hasn't happened. Yes, we have grown 5% of the whole industry, but to feed the world,
5%?
yeah,
Oh,
of the fresh market, right? The
yes.
fresh market, right? It's the organic. It's only because we're in the coast that we have more organic. But Midwest and anywhere else, organic is not a deal. Transporting organic is hard, and maintaining organic is hard. But my thinking is that we're going to try to do local farming for local supply, but we will not be able to overcome the fact that we need other countries to supply our food and for us to supply the food.
So talk about almonds, because
Mm-hmm.
almonds I know are huge here in California.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, what is the impact of almonds considering the current global economic?
Um, well, almonds will stay. Will well. First of all, we're now the leader in almost in the world. Kind of like
Yes.
I always talk about one beautiful fruit, which is alcachofa. Shoot, I forget the name in English, but we became from Italy. They brought the plant here, and now we're the number one supplier in the world and the number one farmer industry of artichokes. Artichokes in Castorville is number one in the world. Okay, so same thing happened with almonds. We started. We're a young country. They brought it from different countries, and now we are the leaders. Um, it's hard to plant a tree and make it grow and produce 7, 10 years later. It's not easy. That's another thing. Even manufacturing is easy, though we know it's not. It's much easier to transport it manufacturing from one, but farming is completely different. It takes time, energy, and it takes know-how. And that, I'll give you one example of avocados. Avocados are Mexico. California was number one for a while. Then Mexico is number one, and Colombia is becoming. And they're having the curve of trial and error, but trial and error is not like one day to the next. It's 2, 3 years later, 2, 3 years later, because that's where it goes.
Hmm. Wow. That's so fascinating, especially for cereal consumers, kids. The fact that strawberries and some of the other frozen or processed specialty crops are in our cereals that are sourced. So if I was a cereal manufacturer, I literally would be sourcing my strawberries from China to put into the cereal. I'll be sourcing, where would I source my wheat from and my soy for
The wheat
protein?
and the different places,
Yeah.
normally wheat will come from within the United States, but to change that to start sourcing dry strawberries for cereal in those quantities overnight. And when I say overnight, it's not tomorrow. I'm talking 2, 3 years minimum to think about how to do it, because it's planting, it's regions, it's infrastructures, it's dripping,
Wow.
and it's also a cultural thing. In China, every family has a little lot that they do X amount of each one of them, and somebody comes and picks up. Imagine that there's a whole country that has a special regime to do that. In our country, we're more liberal. We're more like, I want to do this. We lived it with Ivory Coast and cocoa beans. Okay, so everybody kind of planted cocoa beans because it was a good business. Everybody wants in Europe their beautiful, delicious chocolate. But all of a sudden when the markets go down, which is what my grandpa used to live with coffee, I'm almost out of business, so I'm going to change now to corn. Okay, going back to cocoa beans, when I pull out that plant, it's going to be impossible. So resilience and sustainability for large corporations is keeping the farmers with the crops in the farms, so we don't lose them, because once you pull that plant out, it's much harder to go back. And I lived that with tobacco in North Carolina. Changing to strawberry took 5 to 10, 15 years, and now you see great strawberries. In North Carolina, but it took culture, because everybody, all the workforce used to farm tobacco. And that's one standing versus now on the ground harvesting strawberries. Different, it's not that easy. And young people don't want to go to the farms to work anymore as much either.
So, if you were to design an intelligent agricultural system from scratch today, knowing what you know, what would you build differently?
Definitely robotics have to be part of it, not because of the labor itself, it's because to bring young generations to enjoy farming and to appreciate farming, we have to be technology driven now. So young people, we see a lot of young people who love to stay in farming, and when they have technology, they do stay in farming. So that's number one, robotics, and the curve and the time that it takes to implement those farming and those technologies important. Number two, definitely specialty crops. We have to no longer eat only our raw crops, so definitely more vertical farming. And vertical doesn't mean cover. I did strawberries vertical, open ground, okay, because there's nothing also like the sun, natural sun on food, period. I mean, we can try to do a lot of things, and I appreciate everybody doing cover and lights and all that, but vertical farmings with sun and with natural water and hopefully more rain if we do, and definitely more enticement on the young generations to come in different, create the new workforce management teams in farms, that they don't think it's like a sacrifice, but it's more like an exciting place to work at. It's the Googles of the world. I want to go and work for Google. I want to go to work for the farm, because not only I enjoy being and help the food and but also the technology.
Your viewpoint about vertical farming on the ground is very contrarian. Why do you think that works better than, I mean, I know you mentioned the sun, but how do we convince, if in fact that makes sense? Because how does that support regenerative agriculture?
Well, you have to be careful when I say that. I'm thinking very much hemispheres like Americas and Africa, because if we go to Saudi Arabia, you have no choice. You have to close, you have to put lights, you have to do things, because you don't have the natural resources,
Right.
quote unquote, to do that. So I'm very biased towards where the food is going, which I said 30 years ago. USA is going to end up importing more than producing. I can quote, bring up the places where I said that and confirm that now we're importing more than we're producing. So I would say because of those, I'm talking those areas where you do vertical farming within in open slate, and I did it. It's not that I didn't. I did it with strawberries, vertical farming on the open. So instead of having more plants across, you have more plants up, and you still drip water dripping, but you still have the sun. And believe it or not, what few people understand is people who want to be in the farming industry, they want to be in the open space.
Yes.
I don't care if it's a 5-year-old or a 100-year-old person, that openness is important. And so let's go back to where what I learned is the human capital. And so we have to remember that we're not robots, we're human beings. So having farms like that, and I was exciting. Like 3 years we did that. The industry was not ready, but we had a wonderful partner buyer who went with us along with it, and we did good. And we've proven the model, and now it can be done. I don't know if somebody was going to do it, but it can be done.
Yeah. Especially driving down or through California from Southern Cal to Northern California, you see all these greenhouses, and they're all covered up, and there's a lot of
But they're
sun.
covered, but they open them. They are open cover. California opens and closes, versus Saudi Arabia is always closed, for example, or desert places. No, they open and close. When it rains, they open it. And they
Okay.
open for sun. So yes, if you go Oxnard and Santa Maria,
Right.
you see them, but you see, if you look very careful, you see that they can be pulled, and they're pulled. So let's say they come a storm, they can cover, or things of that nature.
Okay. What role should community, because you talk about community, the culture, what role should that play in industrial scale food production?
The communities, I would
Yeah.
say more, I wouldn't say the communities, I would say the legislations.
Mm.
The communities only have so much power, and I've seen it. Legislation has more. We need more human beings in legislation who understands not only workers but entrepreneur farmers. We have to balance it. We have to
And
balance
so
it.
how do we balance that with like the algorithmic predictions and on-ground reality?
We need our legislators to read more data, to understand more data, and that's not just ag; it's in general. And the data should be more on real time data. Reading data from 5 years ago or 3 years ago is no longer valid for me to make decisions on legislation. It's literally not. And that's what I think the new administration is trying to push. I'm not sure whether it's right or wrong, but what we need to do is legislators should start taking more courses on data analysis, data thinking, and push the teams to do more data analysis. Because in the farming industry, if you start looking at the data and synopsis of the data, it will help them understand how to manage legislation better. So in our case, for example, we have one of our widgets is labor, and it can show the trends of labor forces in rural areas moving towards urban areas. That's our biggest loss. It's not in the rural areas; it's more in the moving to urban areas, which is what my parents had. Rural people moving into the city, and that's who my parents educated. So that you will see here. So our data shows even the movement from crop to crop. So how to manage those labor forces. So yes, that's one of the variables of the 76 variables, labor. It's starting to get narrower and less around not only the United States but the world.
So Martha, I just want to clarify that you are building or you are a fintech startup, right? And your end user market are the agricultural industry in simple language.
Actually, there are 23 industries that use our data. The first one is the farmer CEO, CFO, or risk manager, the person who has to make a lot of tough decisions in order to be able to buy more fertilizer, get a loan from the bank, so they understand what happened and what happened in the past and what could happen in the future. Then the buyer, the other extreme of the supply chain, the buyer, who is going to create these massive contracts of $1, 2, 3, $4 billion contracts of one commodity. That if they understand better how the crops move and which regions produce more, when they're sitting with suppliers, they have a level. The playing field is leveled of, hey, I get it. Chile produces this, Argentina that. Blueberries. Look at the blueberry throughout landscape. It's daily. We see the trends. How do we do this contract? not to impact you and the farmers, because most likely very few farmers are sitting at the table, are middle people that need to exist in this industry. People say, well, we need to get rid of the middle man. We can't, we should not, because it will impact even the farmer. The farmer has to sell not only the large sizes to Amazon or Walmart or Kroger, they need to sell the smaller sizes. They need to sell the grade 2 sizes. So there's a lot of, a tree is not a factory that produces the same avocado everywhere, or the same blueberry. Different sizes for different markets, different. So you need that middle company. There are around 1,000 in this country that sell to our buyers. And so we need that middleman and the buyer to level having that data to manage those contracts better. And then you have the trucking companies. Should I send 200 truckloads to McAllen today when they closed the border because there was an issue? Okay, so logistics. We have also insurance, and the most important one for me is the financial institutions. And I have been on record since the time of Mr. Alan Greenspan that we don't have enough financing for this industry, and I'm talking specialty crops. Everybody thinks the other industry, the raw crops. But we, little by little, we have been pushing to get more funding and banks to understand this industry, and this new administration is going to push that more. For good or for bad, it's going to be a benefit to the rural areas.
Well, Martha, I think when I hear entrepreneurs such as yourself who are very thoughtful in how they think about the solutions that they're providing. Usually I found that those entrepreneurs really come from a on the ground, boots on the ground reality. So it sounds as though this is definitely an intercontinental issue or problem or solution.
Or
But
opportunity.
opportunity. Earlier in the conversation, you talked about the Northern Hemisphere, or should I say the shift to where the Southern Hemisphere globally will be supplying the Northern Hemisphere's food.
100%, yes.
Yes. So can we talk about some of the intercontinental exchanges we should think about in today's society, considering the environment as we see it today?
3 things on my radar on that. We're not going away from being intercontinental because you can only grow artichoke in Monterey, California. The weather, the patterns, the flavors. You can only have certain coffee from Ethiopia. Period. That's it.
Coffee.
One of the best coffees, though we Colombians will argue that.
I'm surprised, but yes, Colombia and Ethiopia are.
The point is that look at the hemisphere, the regions, the water, the jungle, the trees, the banana trees. Every region is not a factory that you move. You can't move. Vanilla from Madagascar. You can't move things like that. So there's no change. It's how leaders start understanding that food should be off the tables of tariffs because it's for humankind. Food is humankind, not a weapon to use for the discrepancies of the governments. The other industry might come and argue, but what people have to realize is you have a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. Whether you have electricity or not, you do it in a fire. Whether you have air conditioning or not, whether you have a car or not, you have to eat and drink water. End of the story. So that should be out of the table. In my mind, that would be the best that could happen. Food out of the negotiations of tariffs should be good for the world, period. And then the second part is more women in leadership of this industry. Because at the end of the day, the people who buy the food at the table is the mom, the woman. And we know good what we want, what we like, how we like it. So we have always, this is a very important data, though 96% or 97% of farms in the United States are family owned and worldwide are 87%. Because when we see a Cargill, we see the big tractors driven by a guy, but it's family owned. And I always, not only by experience, by seeing it, the ones who makes always the decision in the back office is the woman. Is the mom, is the wife, is the sister. I have interviewed gentlemen that are 60-year-olds, whether they're white, they're African American, or they're Hispanics, or they are Vietnamese, and they cannot make a business decision without the wife approving it. Yet that wife or sister or mother is not in the forefront of, hey, when I tell people, when you come and visit and you want to sell a piece of tractor, make sure you involve the woman since the beginning of the conversation. Don't leave it to the poor guy to try to go and sell it back there. Come and show her the features. Show her, involve her in this decision, because eventually what happens is that sometimes the gentleman disappears for many reasons. They die early, they don't take the business, and the woman ends up being there, but not having the knowledge of the business, and we end up running that farm.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well said. Points well taken. So I'm going to throw some assumptions at you. This is just a rapid fire round. Give me your gut reaction, and we'll dig deeper into the ones that spark something. So, first statement: more data always leads to better agricultural decisions.
For sustainability of the regions and the community.
Good. Small farms are inefficient and will naturally disappear.
They are inefficient and they will not disappear?
And they will naturally disappear.
Depends on the country.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
Definitely. Countries that are developed countries or underdeveloped countries, there's a new terminology here, they will not disappear because the small nature of the farming allows them to eat from the same farm and survive with different crops. While especially in the south and the belt of the world, the Ecuadorian up and down, the two Capricorn and Cancer, we will survive the smaller farmers because you feed yourself from that farm. The extremes will not, because they cannot produce lettuce all year round or tomatoes. They might survive on the pigs and the cows. So I still believe we will survive. It will be for purposes of yourself survival, not for industrial.
Yeah. So which is why you talked about like the importance of local production as we move forward into the future.
Right.
Okay. Can technology eliminate weather-related crop losses?
Yes. 100% yes. Because you will understand better how to manage crops and therefore sustain the blooms coming at you. Yes. I mean, we're not talking a tsunami, but we're talking general patterns of changes, right?
Okay. So let's talk about tsunami, because general patterns of general patterns of weather. Yes. But let's say hurricanes, snowstorms, tsunamis. Can technology predict that?
Yes.
Satellite imagery, like, could it be better?
No, because you still have human beings. I mean, I can see trends on the farm, but nobody will know that farm region, the bank pull out and there's no more financing in there. So they're doing the best, which happened in Ivory Coast with cocoa beans. I mean, when they saw that the business was not doing good, the banks start pulling out, so the farmers have no money. So now how they're going to manage the crop without the funding for fertilizers and things of that nature. So no, you need more than, and I always have said parametrics are okay, but you need down on the ground. As I always have said, the detective on the ground having a coffee with somebody also makes a difference. So yes, we need not only satellites, we need more than satellites.
Yeah. And this idea of human in the loop, right? Yeah. So let's talk about global supply chains. Are they more resilient than the local ones?
Yet to be proven. Okay. Especially with this whole tariff issue, we still writing the history of that. Local ones right now will survive faster or will stay more on board. It's how much money is on the bank to support this whole change.
So let's talk about blockchain. What are your thoughts? Do you think it creates transparency in food supply chains?
I do believe in blockchain, 100%, yes. And that whole me and my buyer contracting, privacy, and 100% I agree. It was due a long time ago.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on climate change?
Well, climate change has been happening, and I know it's not very fun to hear. I remember when I went to an event at Milken Institute, and the Nobel Prize of Economy showed a graphic of the last, I don't know, 200 million years of Earth and weather changes. And we're like this teeny blip of change compared with the big things that we have had in Earth, right? So since I've been in this industry, we have had climate adjustments all the time. I think, yes, definitely we have intensified a little bit more because we have more human beings, more gas, more cars, more this. Definitely. It's much faster, and now we're more aware of it. But I used to have to plan ahead, a program 2, 3 years in advance, and analyze weather. And knew that things could happen. In our industry, every 7 to 10 years, we had a change of weather. Now it's 5 to 7. But there's always that cycles. There's cycles of weather patterns.
Yeah, they're getting shorter, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a favorite question. If you were to, um, no longer be here on this earth and no one could find Agtools, no one could find a website, no one could find any of your cartoons, what are three truths, three wisdom that you want to leave with the world?
The first one is always smile.
Yeah.
It changes everything. And I mean that because even when I created my comic strips, people used to say, "Oh, you bring a smile to my face." And that was the best gift prize ever when you hear that from you bring a smile to my face. So smile, it changes everything, literally everything of attitude. So that's number one. Number two, the stamina to stay in this world is so important. And I mean this for me, my young people. I see my kids that the stamina is less every year, less stamina to challenges. They want it's easier and faster, and the world will not change. The world will always be the world with challenges, so we need stamina, and build more stamina. And it's hard to teach kids a stamina because they get a little bit offended when when you tell them stamina. Things are that easy.
They're like, what, mom?
Yeah, I mean,
Is
come
that
on.
on TikTok?
Yeah, I can order my food here. I mean, things of that nature. And then the third most important one, do at least a year to 2 years of farming. Going to a farm. Do yourself a favor and be a farmer or work in a farm a couple of years. It will make you realize life is so much beautiful than you think it is.
Yes. I agree with that. When I was 10 years old, I was sent off to boarding school in Nigeria, West Africa. And one of the very first things that they did was you had to bring a hoe and a machete. So when we arrived, everyone was assigned their own plot of land. So every semester or every school year, so for 6 years, every school year, you had your plot of land you were assigned, and that plot of land you had to till, you had to, figure out the soil, you had to plant your corn, and everyone's combined harvest at the end of the year is what would now go and feed the school. And so, yes,
So
number
and
three
it's
is
so
support.
rewarding,
It is so
in the
rewarding.
soul.
Yes, yes, hard labor, but you see the fruit and it teaches you. I think that's where that stamina comes into play, that resilience. It teaches you the art of patience, that everything is in life is not like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it takes time. Same
To
thing
build.
with fine wine. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with grapes. Same thing with just farming in general and the food that we put on our plate. So yes,
It
I
is. One of my best technologies heroes is Mr. George Lucas. And Mr. George Lucas came from Modesto, California, which is a rural agricultural area. And if you read, anybody can read his bio, will see a lot of the Star Wars and all of his movies are going back to his agricultural root city. And the technology that he built around music for the industry, for entertainment, but now for everything, the Dolbys and all those things, come from that time. And if you look at leaders that come from rural areas, are super smart, sharp, and so yeah, please do send your kid to it. We should actually, I should create a school for kids
Yeah,
like that.
you should create maybe not the school this year.
Yeah,
So
2 years, maybe
you
that
have
would
to
be, hey,
suggest
your summer camp is agriculture.
yes, a summer camp would be great. And that's right around the corner. And it's something that you don't even need to do a lot to put that together. And hopefully, maybe there's some parents out there who have flexibility and will say, you know what? I think that is a fantastic idea.
Yep,
I'm going
and
to send my child to a farm for summer camp
yep, to work,
to work.
not to enjoy, to
Awesome.
work. I make money. I make money.
Well, I mean, to work, to understand the earth.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
So, Martha, if someone listening today is allocating capital in technology that supports holistic agricultural farming, data, what's the one contrarian bet they should consider that might seem completely wrong to their investment committee?
A woman with experience in the industry,
Mm,
because normally it's young generations, young guys that they claim they're going to disrupt the industry. We
mm,
don't need to disrupt it. We can't disrupt this industry. No, you can't. It's called food. It's called patterns of nature. So trust the industry people to invest in this. Yes, you can bring the young people part of it, but not the leaders for now. That's the concern.
because the young people are looking at it more from a bird's
Technology
eye
only.
view
And technology only.
and technology only without even really even lifting a hoe, and
Mm-hmm.
that's HOE,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or a machete to cut the grass, and they don't even have that, they don't have the idea of that concept,
Mm-hmm.
the physical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they don't have that physical aspect of it, when you're investing in their technology, it's very myopic, it's very one-sided. They don't understand the full
The
circle.
whole food cycle. And doing a couple of years or 1 year of, oh, I work in a supermarket and I did this, or I work in the farm. No, no, no. You need, the concern is, please invest in the season. And I'm starting to see less young people and more seasoned, thank goodness, because we can't afford to make mistakes anymore. The food supply chain is dwindling. So we need more adults in the room leading the companies, invest on us, invest on many of us women who have been in this industry for a long time, in the shadows of the
Mm,
guys. But now the
mm.
guys are gone because they were more adult than us. And so now we are still the youngsters of the industry. So invest on us, many of us women in this industry, and biologicals, technology. There's many of them now. They're starting to finally pop up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Martha, thank you so much for the time. Even I myself, as an investor, I'm learning a lot from you. And I
Thank you.
do agree with you about older founders. I think my portfolio of companies tend to skew toward older founders, people who have deep domain expertise in their industries and can really bring very insightful conversations on
Mm-hmm.
how technology, which is where now we need that younger mind to actually create something that is beautiful and that
Mm-hmm.
can impact humanity on a global scale.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%.
Cool. So, for our audience of founders and capital allocators, Martha's work reveals something critical about market intelligence in any sector. The most sophisticated prediction models in the world are only as good as the assumptions built into them. And those assumptions are often invisible to the people making the algorithms. The real alpha in agricultural futures or any futures might come from understanding the cultural, the social, and environmental variables that do not fit neatly into spreadsheets or even AI, right? But determine whether these systems actually work when they're stress tested by reality, because reality is truth. So, Martha, thank you so much for this conversation. Where can people continue learning from your work?
Definitely ag.tools. It doesn't have a .com, ag.tools, and my email is martha@ag.tools.
Perfect. To our listeners, if this conversation shifted how you think about your strawberries, your blueberries, or even prediction versus adaptation, I want to hear from you. Email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Our next episode, we're going to be exploring creativity, futuristic branding, and psychotechnology as we build our businesses. Until then, keep questioning the obvious and keep smiling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.